secrets. Right.
You can start.
Right, so this is my presentation for my 3D animation. It's my showcase of just my work so far. So just sort of a general gist of what's going to be on it. This is a nice little contents page. The introduction, the goal was of the project was to showcase a understanding of the 12 principles and how to effectively use them. I decided to make a small animation focused around, at first, there will be a storyboard attached. It's just currently I was having issues finding the original sketch of it, so it will be attached later. But at the minute, it's just not there. I believe it might actually be on my mirror board. It's the original storyboard was someone throwing a stone at a tree and an apple falling. I originally changed that to I later on changed it to be about two people because that way it's a bit easier to show off the different sorts of principles because there's as much as there is you can do a lot with someone just throwing an object at a tree. I felt it would be a bit easier. I also changed a few things here and there, as you can see with the first test. The third test in random, which is here, where originally he was going to get hit by the apple and then fall backwards. I spent a fair bit of time trying to make him falling backwards look naturalistic and more what's the word? More realistic. I said naturalistic and realistic twice. However, in time, I didn't really like how it was playing out, so I decided to make the change of having two people. That way, it'd look a bit better. The animation itself, which is here. Where it hits, and then it's up there. This isn't the finished one. There's a few things I want to change on it, and there's a few things I'm aware that there's a problem with. I'll get to that in just a moment. My justifications are my research into 12 principles help me help me give my animation some life. I use arcs to help showcase the fluidity, not just in the apple, but in the little stone. It is a little it bounces, and with each bounce, it's a small arc, even though that might be balancing on that. Another principle I use was exaggeration. The ball sort of expands a little bit as it hits. Sort of there's a bit of a when it came to actually making the arm throwing it, I took inspiration from actual cricket balls and stuff like that. Something I spoke to Katie about, where I would sort of have the stone be sort of thrown and overly pulling back a bit more before throwing it. As I said before, the original development only had a person with a tree. The apple was going to fall from the tree, and that's where it ended. I changed this involved to a second person, as well as the guy getting impacted by the apple themselves. I believe this helps add to the scene, giving it a better, clear example to talk principles, because it was a very static scene. When I first made it, it was very much like one thing happened, another thing happened very away from each other. It was very clearly I was worried about my skill set when it came to animation, and decided to sort of challenge myself with having multiple moving parts, there being the stone, the apple, the guy, the person A and person B. For feedback, I looked to my peers and asked them what I thought. For example, I asked Brandon and Max a lot of their thoughts on this. I also they mentioned stuff about making sure the arm movement looked a bit more fluid. I also originally the apple bounced in a very specific, non-really arcs manner because I wasn't fully used to messing around with arcs. It very much just hit almost like a V angle where it'd go down and bounce back up, and then change it to be a more fluid where it sort of bounces in a sort of in an arc. They also went around and found some sort of reference photos for what's it called? The animation of throwing stuff, apples falling. I looked at different sort of animations, sort of saw what the inspiration from that, which I probably should have had this screen on when I was talking about that part. Where for the analysis, I noticed the throwing gesture was a bit stiff. Okay, that's all the stuff I mentioned earlier, basically. And for my conclusion, I've left this deliberately blank because I prefer to talk about this in voice. For my conclusion, I'm relatively happy with how things turned out. There's a few things I would go back. I am going to go back and tweak with a little bit of extra time we've got. That being, first of all, the actual animation of the ball hitting the ground. I might go back and fully remake it because depending on how much time I have, because there's a few things here and there that I do not like how it looks. It stays in the air for a bit too long. It gets a bit exaggerated around where it shouldn't do, and I feel like just fully reworking it might be a better idea. But all in all, I think I did it would be a bit. It's going to be easier to see on the mirror board itself, but I think I've used the 12 principles relatively well. Like the arm, for example, I had to frame by frame that because like with the actual like stone because I couldn't get it to like latch on properly. I just frame by frame the stone going back in and throwing it, which there's probably better ways of doing it, but it's free to frame by frame. And here's a link to sort of all the references I use and the reading for that. There's a couple more as well on the mirror board unrelated to this, but that goes more into the history of animation. And just any questions here?
Also, send me a bit of feedback on some questions.
I think it was really good how you really went into all the principles you've used. It's a big thing I've noticed that you really did quite well with, kind of talk about how you did it or how you either want to improve it. I'd say the only thing I'd wonder about is if you put any like lighting into it or anything, just so it's a bit easier to possibly see kind of a stone being thrown, I guess.
Yeah, that is fair. If I go back to my animation, I did have a bit of issues with rendering, and when I actually get back to like properly rendering this, I'm definitely have like an extra light there, and like maybe have to make the camera angles to make it a bit better. What I might do is I might sort of zoom it in a little bit, like make a separate render of the stone throwing, zoom in on that, and then have sort of like add a more dynamic shot to it because it's very static at the moment.
I think your staging is probably masking some of the quite technically difficult things that you've done there. Like you talked about your anticipation of drawing that arm back, and you refined that over quite a long period of time, and then you went in frame by frame, or pose to pose, use the stone and things like that. So I think similar to what we spoke about on Benzies, maybe thinking about not just having one static camera angle all the way through. Extend that background so you've not got them obviously sitting in a box so they feel like they're in a space. So make the entire background bigger and longer so they feel like they're sitting in that very simple, what we call it, forest environment. And then think about the key movements that happen in this. So you could cut to a camera angle of the character drawing their arm back and throwing that. You could cut to an extreme close up of the stone hitting the tree. Or even the bounce on the floor. Like you've got a sequence of different events. We're seeing them all from quite far away.
Yeah, that is.
And some of the things that you've done are quite difficult to see from this camera angle. So I think just without you having to really do much more in the way of animating, yes, okay, there's a bit of an edit job at the end. You could render this out multiple different cameras, and you could actually take advantage of a lot of the animation that you've done, which I just don't think you're getting.
From that angle, I'm very much hiding my own, like the actual, as you say, the technical parts of it. I mean, as I say, it's kind of hard to see the stone. It's kind of hard to see sort of the pullback. Yeah, that is definitely something I can very quickly like.
Which wouldn't mean lots more animation, a bit more rendering time, but I think you've got time to do that. I think then some of the feedback that other people have given you, it will be more obvious that you've implemented that feedback because we can see it.
Not to mention, this is obviously a bit more for the mirror board. I have saved every major milestone as a separate 3D Max file, so I can put them on and show that showcase.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So I think again, maybe a little bit more clear labeling of your use of the principles, whether that's in the final thing or whether that's more likely on your devlog, then fine. But I think staging is the one thing you've kind of rendered it out straight on, looking at it as a scene, and I think you could show a lot more interest. It will add to your appeal.
Yeah.
But also I think you're not showing what you've actually done in the best light just because it was really difficult to see it from so far away. So I think that's definitely something you've got time to sort it without, again, lots of extra work. I would definitely consider spending a bit of time doing that before the final deadline. And then again, add to either these presentations like or your mirror boards with those changes, those developments and improvements you've done based on the feedback you've received.
Yeah, that's good to me.
Okay, anything else you want to
add? That was just mainly the main thing I wanted to say about all the staging. I think like everything else was really good, especially how you kind of
staging is the one that if you do the others well takes care of itself. It's kind of you've almost done it the opposite. You've not taken advantage of the staging, which means the other principles you're getting lost in the fact they're not as visible as they should be or could be.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
right, let's stop the recording.